Today we're going to be breaking down the 5-4 match between Manchester City and Fulham, a game that looks chaotic on the surface but underneath reveals two very different tactical approaches. We'll start with the lineups, then move through each phase, City in and out of possession, Fulham in and out of possession, and finish by talking about why this game became so open. I'm going to start off by talking about Manchester City, who on paper lined up in a 4-3-3. Per usual, though, this only tells part of the story, with City actually playing with a lineup similar to that of a 3-2-2-3. Throughout the match, we saw Gonzalez and Reinders operate as the initial double pivot, while Silva, Foden, O'Reilly, and Doku were often seen rotating heavily to manipulate Fulham's defensive structure. Fulham, by contrast, were much more direct. Burge operated as the main pivot, with Lukic initially acting as a deep-dropping 10 to help facilitate the build-up. Their front line stayed high and narrow, clearly looking to exploit space behind City's back line rather than control long spells of possession. From the opening minutes, the game became a contrast between City's control through structure and Fulham's threat through disruption. First, we're going to talk about Manchester City in possession. Throughout both halves, City consistently built out with a 3-2-2-3 shape. The back three was rarely static, with the biggest change being Bernardo Silva frequently dropping into the right center-back position. This allowed Nunez to push higher in order to create more width in the middle third. Guardiola typically had Gonzalez and Reinders playing the double pivot and instructed them to be positionally flexible as well. At times, we saw Gonzalez drop into the back line, Silva step into midfield, and occasionally even Foden would drop into the pivot role. This approach by Pep was taken to prevent Fulham from establishing clear pressing triggers, which resulted in Fulham's struggling attempts to win the ball high up the field. In the second half, City maintained a similar approach, but were not as fluid once Gonzalez was subbed and Stones came in to take his place. Although this substitution pushed Reinders into a higher position, Stones was less positionally rotational, making it easier for Fulham to defend. With the ball, City's objective was to progress through the right channel. It was typical for Silva to look for Foden dropping deep and playing into an overloaded right side. Once in the middle third, City maintained their 3-2-2-3 structure, but with subtle role changes to maximize fluidity and width. It was typical to see changes between Doku and O'Reilly, who could be seen stepping into the inside channel to make sure that City's midfield box was always maintained. Meanwhile, the player on the outside would maintain width so that Fulham's midfield were stretched while also dealing with the City midfield overload. The cue for this positional rotation between Doku and O'Reilly occurred once the ball progressed beyond the defensive third. Once City were out of the initial build-up, that's when we saw O'Reilly make his run inside, with Doku staying wide until he got on the ball. Once on the ball, he was free to drive inside. On the right side of the field, Nunez was responsible for consistently providing width, allowing Foden to find space in the right half space. City repeatedly played through the right side, which invited Fulham to be drawn out of position. When the ball was in the final third, City transitioned into a 3-2-5. Doku was typically seen back out wide, while O'Reilly was in the inside channel and in the box. Silva and Gonzalez would also rotate in order to use Silva as an attacking threat. During this phase, Foden was used more as a facilitator and would dip into midfield to receive the ball while Silva occupied a higher position. The main path to goal for City during this phase rotated between wide progression leading to crosses into the box and central passes when Fulham's block became disconnected. This setup directly led to the goals scored by Haaland and Reinders. In short, during the build-out phase, City looked to have one of their double pivots drop to receive the ball before turning and playing into an overloaded wide channel. City would then look to progress to the right, typically with Foden, where he would look for a pass out wide or drive inside. City would then look to find a pass through the middle, and if that didn't work, score off a cross. Now we're going to talk about Manchester City out of possession. During the high pressing phase, City looked to use a 4-1-3-2, with the first two players applying immediate pressure. The three players behind them then provided zonal coverage, forcing Fulham to play out through the wide channels. This was when City activated a pressing trigger on both of Fulham's fullbacks, with Nunez and O'Reilly stepping aggressively to prevent progression. In the second half, this was a rare sight, with City opting to play with a 4-4-2 mid-block instead. If Fulham were able to beat City's initial high press, City would shift to a 4-1-4-1, forcing Fulham to either look to play between the lines or send a ball over the top. With either option, City had the chance to intercept a pass or win an aerial duel. When City defended in their defensive third, they dropped into a 5-4-1, with the main priority being compactness and preventing central progression for Fulham's attackers. City initially looked to invite crosses from wide positions and trusted their numbers in the box. However, cracks started to show once Smith Rowe scored a header late in the first half. Now we're going to talk about Fulham in possession. Fulham looked to play forward with what looked to be a 3-4-3 formation, with a double pivot, a 10, and an 8 dropping for passing support. We often saw Berg dropping into the pivot role, which moved Lukic into the 10 position on the right side to help progress the play. In the second half, Lukic's role was given to Smith Rowe, and on occasion we would see Iwobi operate similar to a double pivot. Once in the middle third, Fulham were much more direct, by looking to play long balls if they were on, and looking to win the second ball. If this was not in the cards, however, Fulham settled into a 4-2-4, looking to keep up with City's 4-1-4-1 structure by isolating Haaland and creating a positional 2v1 versus Gonzalez. Once in the attacking position, in the final third, Fulham opted to get numbers in the box in order to disrupt City's defensive structure. This chaos is what led to Fulham's second, third, and fourth goals. Ultimately, Fulham utilized a 2-3-2-3 structure to maximize the players high up the field. When Fulham were without the ball, they primarily defended in a 5-3-2 mid-block, and then transitioned to a 5-4-1 low block. When the ball was in the attacking third, Fulham did try to press City with a similar structure to City's defensive shape of a 4-1-3-2, but with much less aggression from the front two. So why did this game become so open? City's tactical progression over the last few months has shifted from a more highly structured setup in all areas of the field to more pragmatism, especially defensively. What was typical of City to defend high with aggression, they are now more accepting of a mid and low block, and this tactical adjustment is still being learned. Although City still hold elements of their highly structured habitual play seen throughout their build-up phase, they are a shadow of their former selves defensively, and are more at risk to losing control of their defensive structure when a team attacks them with chaos, which is what Fulham did. I imagine City will get better in due time, but during this game, they showed signs of giving up control without being able to handle their defensive duties. I'd love to know your thoughts on this game and what reasons you think are the results of City's defensive woes. Thank you.